A2IM, the collective voice of independent music.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to the final discussion of 2020. My name is Alyssa Mark, and I'm the Director of Label Member Relations at A2IM, the American Association of Independent Music. We started this series earlier this year as a way to keep our community connected and educated while we dealt with the hardships of COVID-19 and lost the ability to meet together in person. And we're so incredibly proud with where the panel series has taken us. Throughout this year, we've covered really pretty important topics that were crucial to battling the many insanities that were thrown our way. We led discussions on how to manage cash flow amid a crisis. We analyzed the impact of coronavirus on the physical supply chain. We held a session on ways to successfully grow a small business regardless of the environment that you're around. I hope that you've all found benefit in watching these discussions, and we look forward to continuing the series in 2021. All of the panels are recorded and archived on our YouTube channel, so you can always access them at any point if you'd like to go back to something. I will drop the link to that in the chat in just a second. So today's finale will be a look back at the craziness 2020 brought with it and its specific impact on the independent sector. We're joined by members of A2IM's board of directors to share their experiences and their insights in the hopes that you'll not only be able to relate to this knowledge, but also better prepare for the upcoming year ahead. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to Dr. Richard James Burgess, President and CEO of A2IM, who will be moderating the conversation. Just a quick reminder that you can post chats in the, you can post questions in the chat below. And if anybody watching is not a member of A2IM and would like to learn more about joining our organization, you can reach out to membership at a2im.org, and we'll get talking. Again, I'll also post that in the chat below. And Richard, I saw you just jumped on, so I'll let you introduce everybody and get started. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. And so, as Alyssa said, we are very lucky today. We have 5 board members joining us. And, it's worth pointing out that as a 501c6 organization, our board is the governance body. So, on behalf of the membership, our board governs the direction of A2IM and decides where we go, what we do. They're very busy people. I'm very grateful for the time they spend on the board, in the board meetings, and so on, but also for taking the time out of their busy schedules to be here with us today. So I'll start by introducing Zena White, who's the managing director of Partisan Records. And then we have Darius van Arman, who's the founder of Jagjaguwar and co-CEO of Secretly Group and Secretly Distribution. We have Madeline Nelson, who's the founder and CEO of Heads Music. Tony Alexander, President and Managing Director, Made in Memphis Entertainment, and Marie Clausen, Head of North America and Head of Global Streaming, Ninja Tune. So thank you all for joining us today. And I have to say, apropos the subject we're talking about, the craziness of 2020, everybody's joining us from all over the planet at this point, it seems, and certainly all over America, but Marie's in the UK even. So, this is all part of what we're going to be talking about. So, there's going to be a discussion. I may sit back and just enjoy it. So feel free to just talk amongst yourselves and swap stories about it. But I thought we'd start with something that we don't talk about a whole lot, which is the human impact of the pandemic. I mean, we talk a lot about the economic damage and, the struggles of, artists, which is very real, the live venues and so on, and streaming, what's happened with streaming. But, it seems to me that everybody is experiencing this pandemic in a slightly different way. It depends on your personality, depends on your situation. If you have little kids, it's a very different experience than if you're single. And if you're single, it's a completely different experience than if you are in a relationship without kids. And so firstly, I was just wondering how you're all doing. And then secondly, how do you think the members of your teams are doing? And what have you had to deal with in order to make sure that everybody's okay? And then I'll throw it out to any one of you that wants to jump in. Or I'll pick one of you if you don't.
I'm happy to take this one.
Okay, Marie. Thank you.
Yeah, I think 2020 has been a very complex year for all of us. I think there was a steep learning curve on the news of this world and the impact that there were, and they definitely pressed into our personal life and in our professional life. And I think on top of the market changed a lot. So yeah, I think on a personal note, I think we're all fine. We are grateful for the things that we have. We are healthy. We are currently with family, which is extremely positive. My children are in school. Our company is doing well. So all of that is really good. And I think you're learning a lot about what to be grateful for this year and not to take everything for granted. Even if I'm looking at board meetings in person or travels that we used to do that were stressful, that we don't have anymore, but that we also miss. And then secondly, I think there was definitely for me personally a big challenge to run a team of 17 across various territories, etc., and how to do that. So I think throughout the year we learned to be working much closer with each other and to be paying more attention to the needs of the other. I think our global teams in general are working better with each other because we are using technology more, and perhaps to some extent have also less distractions sometimes. I think overall our teams are really happy that the year is ending. I think everybody worked really hard to I think our job really is to add value to our artists' careers and to find new ways how we can bring additional revenue in, how we can run successful campaigns, to pay attention to what's happening in the market. And all of that definitely led to people working really, really hard. And so, yeah, we are all happy that this year is ending soon.
Good. Thank you. I mean, that seems to be a hallmark of the year, that despite the fact that we're not traveling anywhere and all the things we're not doing, we all seem to be working a lot harder, right?
Yes.
It's hard to explain that. So anyone else want to jump in on the personal and what's going on with your teams?
Sure. It was, like Marie said, a very hard year on a personal level for our employees. And for our companies, we have teams all around the world, about 150 people who have, became accustomed to some sort of office life, and they were used to communicating with each other remotely. That's what we do. But then the added layer of doing it from home all the time was really hard. And there was also a lot of uncertainty. And we're also in a time when we're balancing a lot of different things. As a company, we're balancing what's best for our employees with what's best for the sustainable bottom line, because, in some level, that is what supports the employees. But we also have an obligation to artists and to distributed labels and to safety of our warehouse employees. And a lot of these things are trade-offs. And so, great credit to my colleagues at Secretly, all of the employees. They did take on the challenge, and they did as much as possible to support each other and support the artists and labels we work with. I think the mistake that we made early on as Secretly was when everything was going on in March and April, and then to May, when people are like, what is going on? How do we make sure we're ready for what's going to happen this year? How do we protect jobs? How do we avoid any salary cuts? We communicated a lot with our employees, but we didn't communicate enough about how they should prioritize their own mental health. And we course corrected on that later on. But early on, the messaging was, hey, we're going to get through this. We have to work hard. We have to do everything we can to take care of all the different things we're balancing. And this is the best way that we can really make sure we get through this in a good place. And we didn't spend enough time saying, hey, before you worry about the company, worry about yourselves. And so I think it was a really good experience for us, even though it was a tough experience for everyone. It was a good experience for us as company leaders, that you have to always be mindful of what the important hierarchies are of what you're supporting. And again, credit to our Secretly team. They really sort of rose to the occasion.
Yeah, you make a great point about that. I mean, people tend to not take time off in a year when you can't go anywhere. And of course, actually, it's probably more important to take time off at a time like this. But it's very easy to just keep putting it off, right? Because
And I should also do a shout out to the warehouse employees that we all work with, either directly or indirectly. We'll talk maybe a little bit more about what's going on in our businesses, but they were truly heroic as far as the work they were able to do in physical spaces, being safe, keeping up with challenged logistics, and supporting all these businesses directly and indirectly.
I think, Darius, you make such a really good point in that during this time where you're asking so much from your teams, and yet they're dealing with so many things personally, whether they be parents and they're dealing with remote learning with their children, or they're dealing with caring for loved ones. And, in certain families, there's multi-generational households where there's the risk of younger members potentially impacting older, more vulnerable members. And, this was specifically challenging for us as an organization this year because one of our senior leadership members passed away, not necessarily from COVID, but from cancer. And so that was an impact on us emotionally during this year. And so we had to do many of the things that you spoke about, and that is really just encouraging people to build those routines that would help them create some kind of normalcy during these chaotic times. And for creatives, that was continuing to collaborate, even though collaboration in its more traditional sense wasn't really possible. But getting together with other creatives and creating music was therapeutic in a lot of ways. And it kind of cut down on a lot of the feeling of isolation that so many were feeling during this period of time, because I truly do think that we're on the verge of one of the most significant mental health care crisis that we're gonna experience as a world, and specifically here in America, because of the experience of being quarantined and having to isolate. And I think that we're already starting to see the impacts of that. And so within the organizations, we've had to be very vigilant about sharing with people the resources such as mental health first aid and things that would be beneficial for them to be able to navigate these challenges. So I think both Marie and Darius kind of hit that right out of the park.
Thank you, Tony. Zena, Madeline, you want to add anything? We can move to other aspects of it. I think we're all having a common experience here, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. I would just say one of the things you touched on too, it's a couple of things impacted our companies. One of those things is that we had an artist who lost 2 family members really quickly in the spring due to COVID. And that was really tough. Just trying to figure out how to help them deal with logistics when we couldn't physically go to help them. That was really, really tough and a bit of a learning curve for everybody. We had one of our staff members who was sick with COVID, and it is still experiencing certain symptoms because of it. And one of our team members who has 3 children. So different grade levels, but all in school at the same time. So she suddenly now is, and same with my attorney, is a full-time teacher, honestly, along with having to do the full-time job. And so then you realize, so for all of those things, the team member who had been sick with COVID, the artist who lost family members, and the team member who is now teaching as well as having to work 8 to 12 hours a day, you start to learn all kinds of allowances now that you have to make for what they're going through. And it is the toughest part of all of that, I believe, is not being able to physically be there for these people that you work with and that you care about. That's been a really difficult thing this year.
Yeah, that's so true. It's so true. You just want to hug somebody. You cannot, right? It's just impossible. Zena, any perspectives on that?
I mean, Madeline's story is kind of the worst case scenario for me, and like I think I relate a lot to what everyone said here, and I think we tried to act really early. We have a relatively small team, a mid-sized team. We have 18 people across the US and the UK, and we tried to act early. It was very easy for us to close offices. So we tried to give people concrete information as much as we could. Obviously, no one's been able to do that. But the fear was exactly what you've been dealing with, Madeline. And I'm glad I'm happy to say so far, although obviously things are still very bad and getting worse in the US right now, we've not had to deal with bereavements in the same way as you guys have, Tony and Madeline, but that was very much the fear that this could really come that close to the team. But I would say that in some ways, I definitely can relate to what Darius was saying. No matter how much we tried to prepare and give information, I think that we did things quite early on, like say, because we knew no one would go on vacation anywhere, that like if the US was having a public holiday, the UK would get it too. And vice versa. So that way, at least people just had these days where their colleagues weren't emailing them. So they could at least just have a mental break. And that worked quite well. But then I think with the social justice movement and Black Lives Matter and that rise in, I guess, was like May, June, I think by that point, everyone was at really at breaking point. And I think we realized at that point that we had not been communicative enough about people's mental health. And so an initiative was suggested to subsidize therapy, which has had quite a bit of uptake. And I'm really pleased, that I obviously come from the UK. And I'm pleased that our UK office has taken that up. Like having mental health therapy isn't as culturally openly talked about in the UK. So that's been like a really, really positive thing that I think has helped the team.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen that thing on social media where it's just sort of one of those things that says it's okay to not be okay. And I think, I don't know, you probably come across this, but I have that. A lot of times you ask people how you doing, and say I'm okay, and just from the tone of it that they're really not okay, and it's quite hard to know how to dig into that and how to sort of help. But it's good to know that it's okay not to be okay. I think seems like an important thing. So let's move to the other aspects. Thank you for that. I mean, I think that's ultimately going to be the biggest thing out of all this. I mean. We've still got a long way to go, and it's there's not just the difficulties of what we're facing, but the sheer length of it, I think, is something that's going to be quite overwhelming for some people, and especially because you sort of feel like, okay, I've done it now, it should be over, and we've probably got another 6 or 9 months to go. So what are the biggest challenges that you and your companies have faced this year? In every aspect, but I suppose particularly from a business point of view.
Well, Richard, one thing I can say, and I guess I'm the neophyte of this group, I'm relatively new to the music industry compared to these seasoned veterans, but what I guess as I'm kind of looking at this from the perspective of someone who's been somewhat of an entrepreneur most of my career, I come to this looking at as tragic and challenging as 2020 has been. Most entrepreneurs will tell you that when there's lots of uncertainty, there's lots of opportunity. And so for us, we have seen a number of opportunities created. The challenge was we have a pretty small roster on our label of relatively unknown artists that we were investing in building careers for. And as you can imagine, that's challenging in any climate, but particularly in a climate like this, because I know with the move to live streaming and so many other avenues, well, that works really well for a more established artist that already has a fan base. But to try to create a fan base through live streaming isn't as easy. So finding other ways to try to bring exposure to artists that do not have an established fan base has been one of the challenges that we've experienced. And what we've been able to kind of navigate, which has been helpful, is the parts of our business that we're involved in, Sync, has created opportunities because music supervisors in many ways are looking to work with emerging independent artists for placements. And so we've had to kind of go on a different path to find opportunities for our artists to be able to build their careers that were very untraditional compared to what we would have expected several years ago. And so what I'm also excited about is this kind of climate where everyone is trying to find their way has given license to experiment, because I think in times past, experimentation was frowned upon. There's this course you need to follow, but now we've been able to experiment a lot. And so a lot of what we've been doing, we can chalk it up as R&D. Some things have worked, some things have failed miserably. But as entrepreneurs, we love to fail quickly so that we can move and pivot and keep changing. And so I think what we've been able to do in our attempt to service the artists that we have the honor to represent is to try as many different things to see what would actually work. Because we've made the commitment to be patient and to try to invest in artist development, which I guess all of us as independents are willing to do, but it's just something that requires a lot of experimentation during this climate.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. Thank you. There definitely are opportunities, but it's a moving target to some extent, isn't it? I mean, it was different 3 months ago than it is today, I would say.
I was going to maybe add that we're fortunate as recording businesses that compared to live music businesses and other businesses that require people being congregated together, we're somewhat pandemic compatible. We enable the replaying of past experiences or past musical works. So we're lucky in that way. I think the business challenges for us have been, what we talked about before, figuring out how to work in a new rhythm with teams all around the world. But it's, I think, really about questions of how do you support artists right now who were previously making a significant portion of their salaries or their income from live. And we had challenges there where we first struggled with such an influx of live streaming opportunities, and then we had to very quickly figure out what is the equitable way to deal with this? What is the label's place in this? And I know different labels have had different philosophies on it, none right or wrong, but we came to the conclusion that the live streaming was really just an analog for live performances, and the best thing we can do as a label is to enable it, support it, not try to take a piece of it. Also, maybe act as an ombud person for the artists to protect their musical creation from predatorial platforms who were using this as a land grab opportunity. I think Tony is exactly right that there's been so many opportunities to do different things too, and that freedom has been great. In fact, we don't know where this economy is going or how music is going to be down the road, so we're not even really experimenting. We're just kind of feeling in the dark what it's going to be, and there's not really a great cost of failing, and so it's exciting in that way. And I think maybe I'll just also add that there are some revenue areas in our businesses or connected to our businesses that are challenged. I was surprised this year. We presumed early on that physical sales were going to really suffer, and we saw something different. We actually grew our physical sales this year, which sounds strange to say now compared to what we were thinking in May. And digital streaming, we all know, has been very, very steady and has even grown this year. I think publishing, I know we're not a publishing organization, but a lot of our businesses have music publishing divisions, I think that is where there's going to be a significant drop off of revenues. The rain on the mountain some months ago stopped, especially with the publishing revenues coming from venues or stadiums or connected to radio airplay, even because a lot of that is a function of ad revenue. And it takes such a long time for that money to come back to publishers or to songwriters. So I think our companies that are involved in that area are getting ready for a time when there'll be less revenues in the next couple of quarters, and trying to be ready to adjust for that. I think it's also had an impact on synchronization licensing as well, although we'll see whether that activity is going to pick up more quickly as people try to catch up with productions in the new year when things become safer for productions to happen.
I love, Darius, that you know the way you touched on live, because here's a reality for my business. One of my artists is a major touring artist. That is like the bulk of the business that we do with and for that artist. And so my earnings from that touring business with the one artist really is what keeps the business going and enables me to be able to spend on, developing the younger, the newer artists.
Yes.
It's you earn it, you put it back into the business, back into the artist. Eventually, they'll be earning. So for that to shut down was like really painful. Like really had to learn some serious pivots. And in the beginning, we were being told nobody's going to be touring for a couple of months, and then it kept changing and growing to the point, that now our agency says we won't tour until next summer, but we've, as of late, heard it actually won't be until next fall. And so as we started getting invited to do these virtual shows, these live stream shows, nobody was actually offering money at first. And for us, we thought of it as, this is an opportunity to stay relevant, though, for people to see you. Like we shouldn't ask for money. We didn't even think to ask for the artists to get paid at first. And, we're talking about with businesses and networks and things, all of whom could have afforded to pay, and we weren't thinking about it. And then there was a point at which two things I think happened. Artists began to realize they better be asking to get paid to do these things, because a show is a show at the end of the day. But also folks started stepping up, brands started stepping up. And so now I'm seeing tons of privates, especially where folks are asking artists to perform for, right now it's their holiday events, or to film something and send for them to be able to show and surprise the team. But it was really interesting to have all that revenue cut out and then to still turn around and be doing shows, but not be getting paid to do those shows and not realizing that you should, or not knowing how to ask to be paid. And the other thing that it made us do was just what you also were talking about, Tony, is start to look at all the versions of this that have been out there that we haven't paid attention to. Several companies that have come to us about doing live stream shows, and we were doing so well with touring, they weren't even thinking about it. It was, why would we do this? We don't need to do this. And now what we're looking at is, now you suddenly realize how big the audience is. Versus playing a venue for however many people, you could potentially be live streaming your show to millions of people. And that's just something we never thought about, because we thought, why do this when we're on the road and our people are going to see us and be able to touch us and talk to us and all of that. So it's a huge shift in the desire to understand live stream has happened for our team.
Yeah. There's another interesting aspect to that too, the live streaming, because on the one hand, instead of playing a venue in a town where, you've got scarcity and people want to go and everything, now you can reach potentially the whole world. But at the same time, the question is, how many of those can you do, right?
Right. before everybody's seen you and nobody's paying anymore.
You're in Philadelphia. Everyone who lives in Philadelphia likes the band is likely to come out, likes the artist is likely to come out. But if you're doing a live stream this week and then you're doing another one next week, is the down? I don't have any answers to that. I wonder maybe have you guys seen how that's worked out at all? Does that pan out? I mean, or you seeing drop off on live streaming?
I think there's two levels of success with live streaming as it's sort of like panned out. I think it's sort of like gone into two lanes. I think that at least in my bubble, I don't know how everyone else feels, but I feel like one of the things that in real life contact has created these little bubbles that we're all living in, and are trying to occasionally reach out and get out of that bubble. But in my bubble of this crazy year, I think the successful live streaming settled into like one of two lanes. And one lane is when an artist just really has that direct relationship with their fan base and they're really happy to just be on their Instagram live or their YouTube live stream and just do it completely off the cuff, like bare bones, acoustic guitar, a cappella, whatever it is. And then the other is a kind of more high value experience for a ticket holder, that maybe it's not actually live, that it's been pre-recorded. I think that the Nick Cave at Alexandra Palace was a good example of that. So there's I think that we personally, I really miss live music. I think what you were saying, Madeline, about being out there, I don't think for music fans, then I don't think that live streaming will replace live, but I can certainly see this extra ticket layer staying for those people who prefer to, watch their favorite artists from their armchair rather than go to the show. So I think we will see some of the high quality stuff coming around, like the VIP experiences that people might be selling for a very mainstream kind of act that can command that, and that's crucially comfortable doing it. I think one of the biggest challenges I think most people here have touched on is how are the artists doing? How are they feeling in this? What do they want to do? I think there's a lot of pressure on artists this year to experiment and get out of their comfort zone. And some artists have done that really naturally and really well. And I think there's no right way of doing things. There's no wrong way of doing things. So no judgment on whatever anyone's choices have been, both as an artist or as a label.
And I would agree with Zena on how the live streaming is kind of stratified, because I know with one of our artists, Porcelain, she did one of the very first YouTube events with badges so that you could actually see how can an artist be compensated through that. And it was very successful, but for the artist, what's still missing is the energy of interacting directly, because you're seeing a lot of these emojis and badges and things like that, but you just don't feel them right there. And so I think that's where these drive up concerts and some of these other more creative ways have come about, which what we've seen that's really benefited. Since we primarily have R&B and gospel artists, it's been very beneficial because if you're coming to those kinds of things, you have to come in your little bubble. You can't go with just anybody. You're going with loved ones, people you really care about. And it seems like certain genres lend themselves to those kinds of activities. And so I think that what we're going to find, or at least what we're finding, is that we have artists that, they're interested in doing the live, the bigger production type events, but to actually be able to scratch that itch they have to really engage their fans in a meaningful way, they need to have some kind of interaction where they're performing and the fans are there live, not virtually, but in the same locale, so that they can have that kind of, they're feeding off of each other's energy. And that is what we're starting to see, a balance in those kinds of things happening.
That's great. Thank you. Maria, you're in a pretty different genre. Is it the same for you guys as well or not?
So we are doing primarily electronic music and indie alternative. So what we are seeing with live not being available right now is that we are keeping a very close eyes on our campaign strategies. So for 2020, we had a pretty priority heavy release year. And I'm finding that we are constantly ready to shift strategy to see how the market reacts. And that we are definitely working on shorter like time frames right now. And we are obviously missing that really important window once a record is out and the artist goes into the market to actually tour it. So filling that vacuum and working on extending campaigns and continuing to keep a momentum up and adding value to our artist campaigns is what we are discussing basically on an everyday basis. I think those are my 2 cents to this.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, touring is the most obvious thing that's been devastated, really. And what do you think is going to happen once this is all over? Do you think it's going to go back to normal? I mean, obviously, some venues have gone out of business. Do you think it's going to completely recover? You think it's going to? I keep thinking it's going to be the Roaring '20s again, like it was after the Spanish flu. But maybe that's just wishful thinking. What do you guys think?
I think there'll be a massive shift in power away from much needed away from like big agencies. I think like the big agencies have really, their business model really hasn't steadfast in this period. And I think that there's a lot of innovation happening in the live landscape that I think is really good for independent artists.
I hope that's the case. I worry that there's consolidation at the same time.
It goes the other way.
Yeah. Like I think you're right with.
I'm an optimist.
Yeah, I think with agents, you're right. I've seen a lot of new agencies start. I think a lot of those agents are like, oh, when the times got tough, my agency wasn't there for me or for my artists, and so they're going a different route, and that's really healthy. Right. But I do see at the same time a lot of the small venues. They're not going to survive. So you're going to have more consolidation of venue ownership or I think even though Live Nation probably had its worst year ever, it's probably going to come out of this with greater market share of potential activity down the road. And so that'll be a challenge too, and there's also this insurance issue as well, where I'm hearing from artist managers that venues and festivals are now pushing the cost of insurance to artists. They're not insuring flights and stuff like that. So that's going to change the economics of touring, which will then have a knock-on effect on what artists are looking for from their record labels. So how that all plays out is to be sorted.
I think also it will be interesting to see which economies are rebuilding first. And, I think China live seems to be already much more developed compared to where we are right now in Europe. So perhaps the core touring market are going to change too. And if it is going to be some of the emerging territories, as you call them, then our knowledge on how to market and expand on artist careers is going to shift, or like at least on my part, like I'm trying to spend time on that right now so that I know how to maneuver those markets.
Yeah. Well, by the way, in terms of the small venues, we're deeply concerned about that, and we supported NIVA, the National Independent Venue Association, which is run by friends of ours, Moose, who, does the Indie Week production for us, runs NIVA, and so we've been really supportive of that. The good thing is there's not a lot of opposition to what they're looking for in terms of relief package, but the venues are really in distress. I mean, it's obviously, how you shut down for probably it's going to be 18 months or so and sustain that business is hard to imagine. Any other thoughts on the live touring, or what's likely to happen with it afterwards? Will we go back to normal? Will we sustain? Do you think we'll sustain the digital side as well? Do you think we'll wind up with a sort of a hybrid model or something?
I believe we're going to have both. I know that there's certainly the desire to go back, and there's going to be demand for that. But I do think live streaming is here to stay.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, I mean, it seems like a good thing in many ways. We obviously we had to go virtual, and we made the decision to go virtual with Indie Week, and everything we did pretty much right away at the beginning of March. And I saw it as an opportunity as much as a necessity. But as you pointed out, Tony, it was a great. Every sort of crisis like this is also an opportunity. So you sort of have to grab it with both hands. And the good thing is you have no choice. So it's not like you second guess yourself.
Oh, you bring up how crazy this year's been, just as far as how disconnected we are. I'm on a board now for the first time with Tony and Madeline. I've never met you in person, I don't think. Or maybe if we did, it was before you were board members. And I think that's the kind of thing we're really missing, on all levels. Our companies, working with our artists, not spending time in the same room with artists, not spending time with each other as board members. It's harder. It's not impossible, but it's more difficult to create those bonds. So I hope this pandemic is short-lived, because I don't know how much longer we can go without not having that connection.
I do.
Okay.
I do also worry about younger generations that are starting to the work right now. Like I see it with interns that are coming in right now. We're trying to onboard virtually, and also new employees who just completely work in the virtual space, and you don't have the coffee break in between or the chatter, the things. Everything is always scheduled basically, and so. I think there are definitely some things that you can do to help it, but it's harder.
It's a problem. We have a team member that we've never met in person. I have no idea how tall she is, or it's a very odd situation. But somehow we've created, we've bonded with her, and it's been great having her. So what about?
Could I just add to that? I agree that in general I'm really, really missing seeing people, but. I do hope that some aspects of virtual working will stay. I think that there are some, like I, for one, have been in the same place to see the seasons change for the first time since I was a child. And just cutting down on travel has allowed me so many it's allowed me to explore so many things for the business as well as for myself. And I think that it has proven that I have had people reach out, and I've reached out to people that I've never spoken to before the pandemic, just to be like, hey, how are you dealing with things? And made new friends and acquaintances across the industry. So I'm hoping that it will actually, that there'll be a hybrid, that, we can still have these like in-person experiences, but like even just on our board, doing things by video call is much better than when we used to all get on the phone and no one could hear what Richard was saying or whatever. So there are definitely silver linings for sure. Sorry, Richard, I'm back over to you.
No, 100%. No, like I said, I've seen you guys talk than me talk, but I agree with you. And by the way, some of us, the introverts among us, some of us are really enjoying the less interaction. Then again, you also find out the extent, the boundary conditions on your introversion, right? So, you think you're an introvert until you can't communicate with anybody.
I miss karaoke. I need karaoke.
Yeah, you do, don't you? I can see that. That's funny. What do you think? What about the relief options that are available to our sector? I mean, what of those were useful? What do you think about what happened and what didn't happen?
Well, great credit to your team, Richard, and yourself for focusing on cooperating with some of those organizations that are looking out for artists and on the live side and the venue advocacy, but also I think putting forward with the Recording Academy, the HITS Act, to give small businesses and artists, a tax break, or actually letting them delay their tax hit, helps them, and stuff like that. I think makes a difference. Small business loans make a difference, whether it's from the federal government or locally, and I know A2IM's advocated for that as well. So I think that's been important. It's hard to know if it's been enough, but it's better than nothing.
I think it's fair to say that nothing's been enough. But when I remember those first couple of weeks, and just thinking through the implications of it, and thinking that this was going to be $1 trillion problem, and there's only one source of money that it can solve $1 trillion problem. Fortunately, initially they did step in. The CARES Act was actually fairly useful. I don't think anybody. Nobody was getting fat off the CARES Act, that's for sure. But at the same time, it got people by when they might not have gotten by. I'm really worried about what's going on right now, where there's simply no bailout in place at all, and it could be a while before there is a bailout. I don't know. How badly are you seeing people suffer from that? I know from a label point of view, we're doing reasonably well, but we're obviously. We're dedicated to our artists, so they are the core of what we do. So how's that going from your perspective?
It's certainly clear that people are suffering tremendously, and in certain locales more so than others. And I do think that it would be great to see some relief, both for live venues as well as some relief specifically targeted at artists. Because for a variety of different reasons, artists that probably were in pretty good shape before are really struggling right now. But one of the things I think that's been really valuable that we've been really focused on, and that's the education piece of this, because when this is all over, we want artists to be more educated about their careers in the industry than they've ever been before. And so one of the things that A2IM has really been helpful for us, because I know one of the things we were able to do, we were able to pull our whole organization together. So we have weekly virtual calls because we're in like 6 different time zones, 3 different continents. And so to have everybody sync up weekly, it's an opportunity to educate. And to have those tools, the resources, whether it be seminars, webinars, just other educational information, it's been beneficial for us because what A2IM has been doing, advocating in a lot of different ways, we've been able to bring that information to the artists so they understand. Because as you can imagine, artists whose incomes have dried up by 90% or more, they find themselves vulnerable to exploitation. And so you have organizations out here willing to trade their platform for exposure, not cash. And when people are really trying to make it, they really are being tempted to go down paths that could be very dangerous. And so we've spent a lot of time. So, I'm not necessarily speaking to a particular bill or those kinds of things, but I think what this organization has certainly equipped us to do is to educate people to avoid things that would make their situation even worse. And I think that, it's bad enough, but it could get worse. Because if you get in a bad deal, if you allow someone to prey on you and now you lose access to some of your content for a period of time because you were pursuing what you thought could be a quick fix for your situation, that's kind of what we've been spending a lot of time doing, is trying to help artists not have their situation get any worse than it already is. So granted, there may be limitations in improving the situation, but there's certainly there were ways to prevent them from getting in situations that were far worse than they were already in. And that's where I think this organization has been tremendous in providing educational resources and advocacy. And that's what we've been trying to share with the artists that we serve.
Go on, sorry.
Sorry, Richard, but I have to jump right in on that because I feel like I can't express the difference being a member of A2IM has made with my business. And just to speak specifically to what you were just speaking of, the education and the advocacy aspect, the seminars that we've been able to attend through A2IM, where we've been able to take in information from streaming services, live stream services, all of it, and be able to bring that information back to our team, bring that information back to our artists, and actually, we built brand new artist campaigns just on the things that we've learned because we've been privy now to certain information through A2IM that honestly we were not otherwise getting. We didn't have the kind of access to the folks at the streaming services who get on these seminars and tell it like it is and give you advice and open up for you to be able to email them. Even at one of the services, I even had someone who's told me that they were willing, and it's happening, that they were willing to do a Zoom with all of my artists and walk them through how to use the platform. That's a thing that never would have happened if I wasn't a member of A2IM. So there's the education piece, and then there's the advocacy piece that honestly before I didn't understand. I did not understand that for independent artists and independent labels, there was this organization that actually does real advocacy. And then coming in and learning the things that we sort of march on Washington about is how I like to explain it to people. It's become a really big deal, even down to how we're now able to be part of Billboard charting. All of it. I didn't understand that there was this organizational body that actually was behind the scenes doing that work. And now I get to be part of that body and on the board of it and be a real part of the action, like making those wheels turn. And so I want to say for anybody who's watching us, who's a potential member of A2IM and has maybe been vacillating, like has been trying to decide if they should join or why they should join, I got to tell you, it changed my business completely changed my business.
Thank you for saying that, Madeline. Bear in mind, you're part of A2IM, so you're part of the solution. So that's what's beautiful about it. When I first joined A2IM, I saw the same thing you did. This was long before I was in this position, and so, it's very much about making the network work, I think. And it's thanks to all of you. As I said at the beginning, without you, this would be nothing. You are the governance of the organization. So thank you for that.
Richard, I was going to just, there's a couple of questions that have popped up.
Yes, I've seen them, yeah. Do you want to answer them?
Well, there's one, and kind of ties to exactly what Madeline was talking about and what you were talking about. And actually, there's two, but I'll try to be brief. Michelle Schacht was asking about how this moment is maybe a catalyst or causes us to reflect on what we want to be after this moment, and how does it make us push for a better world for all of us? And my answer to that, and I'm curious what others would say too, is I think for me, it's put a real magnifying glass on how mutual everything is, the mutuality between all of our businesses, how much, although we want to be independent, how much we rely on each other, how much we, rely on artists, how all the different parts of the industry coexist and reinforce each other. And I think for our companies coming out of this moment, we are motivated to do a better job of balancing, looking out for our own sustainability and giving back to the system around us and helping it be more sustainable, more efficient, pushing for greater transparency, pushing for greater rights and independence of artists, fair deals. It's hard to say specifically what can be done because the music industry is so complicated. But I'm hopeful that we come out of this moment with a lot of positive, sustaining energy to push for more equitable foundation for what we do, whether it's live, recording, publishing, all of it together, artist management, advocacy. All of it is mutually entwined.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Darius. And I want to say, you've certainly been a powerhouse in that regard. The various boards you sit on and so on. I know that all of you, do so many different things. And I think that interaction, that sort of interconnectedness is well, as you rightly point out, it's hard to say exactly what to do, but I think that you kind of have to try all those different things. And it seems to me that you all are. And I think that that is the answer to the problem ultimately. But anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I wouldn't mind following up actually what Darius was responding to Michelle. I saw that Michelle had followed up her question, talking about the digital ecosystem. And I know that we only have a few minutes left of the conversation, but I actually wanted to take the opportunity to share an anecdote directly with you, Michelle. I have two older sisters, and they happen to be very huge fans of your album, Short Sharp Shocked. And just the other day, they were both hitting me up on WhatsApp, telling me, Zena, you must know how we can get a hold of this record. We just can't find it digitally. I don't want to have to go and buy a CD. So I think in response to your question about the digital ecosystem, in a very short answer, yes, as much as it certainly has its issues, we have, as an independent community, we've got a lot of battles to fight. That's something that we do at the A2IM board quite frequently, is talk about putting pressure on the digital players, figuring out when they're pushing boundaries, figuring out what our marketing strategy is about what those problems are. But at the end of the day, like Darius said, these platforms or this ecosystem is actually allowing us to sustain and to survive and to continue to reach new fans in an ever-evolving marketplace. And if there's any way that we could have Short Sharp Shocked on streaming services, I know that it would make my sisters very happy.
Well, thank you for that. I think we're just about at the end of our time. Unfortunately, it's flown by. And I really want to thank you all for taking the time to do this. So thank you to Zena, Darius, Madeline, Tony, and Marie. It's been really amazing having you, and it's really just a gigantic honor and pleasure to work with you all. So thank you so much. And to everybody that's listening, I want to say A2IM is everybody. It's the membership. It's the entire network, as I said before. So, please don't hang back. And please be a part of it. And we're listening. We're here for you. We are your organization. So please tell us what you need. Thank you all.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.